Okay, good morning, everybody. Hope everybody is well. Welcome to the show. Happy Monday. We've been talking about this idea of rituals, resolutions, the want to want. Really, what we're trying to drive at here is a few things. One is aligning your mind with your goals, not working against your mind, working with your mind. And that's going to require a little bit of patience. That's the hardest part for people. As soon as they see the goal, they want to immediately get it. And we live in a world where that seems to be normal. It's normalized. Remember, everything that we experience is part of our mind, right? As you start to work this in your head, you see the implications of what neuroplasticity does to you, for better or for worse, right? Exposure to anything gets into your head. It gets into the computer called your brain. Now, one of the key traits here that it gets in the way, if you will, is patience. I'm reading a lot about Theranos. Theranos? Did I say that right? Theranos, I think. I don't know how you pronounce that, but the startup of Elizabeth Holmes. Elizabeth Holmes was recently convicted of fraud. 37-year-old founder of this incredible startup that was going to change the way blood testing works, right? Promised the world that just with a drop of blood, they can do an enormous amount of tests, saving people of these diseases that would have otherwise had to go into a greater facility, draw a lot of blood, do a lot of tests, right? So as this comes to light, you start to understand this type of behavior, right? Projecting, seeing, right? This incredible vision of this young upstart to create a world in which you can build a technology that could analyze a drop of blood that would otherwise take in lots and lots more blood. And as you delve into it and understand that it's just the amount of blood is critical, how much liquid, all these pieces are, you don't just draw lots of blood for no reason. And she has this dream of building this technology that can do it, and basically sells it to people, even though the data in the labs are showing that she's not doing it, and that the accuracy is not as high as she says it is, and the proficiency isn't as high as she says it is, and it's not really testing for the things she says that it says that it is, and etc., etc. Right? And as you look into the story, and I'm doing a little research into it because it fascinates me, you don't really hear these stories. You hear a lot about like Elon Musk and Steve Jobs, Bill Gates. You hear all these incredible success stories. Like, this is a real high profile Silicon Valley disaster. Right? This is like, for those who have been following for years ago, this is like the equivalent of like an Enron. But Enron's not really a Silicon Valley startup. Like, you don't really get this so much to understand, some of the mental challenges, if you will, of the startup mentality. Right? You see this a little bit with Uber, but in a little bit of a different way. Travis Kalanick and how he went down. I see this a little bit with WeWork, if you study the WeWork story. If you study businesses, you see that a lot of this stuff plays out. And in the story, Elizabeth Holmes basically has no patience. That's really what it is. She has no patience. She's making deals with Walgreens before the technology is developed. She's getting reports from her. There's a lot of other reasons. It's not just that, obviously. But she's getting reports from her team saying, we're not ready to launch a center in Palo Alto. And she's like, no, we have to. This idea that I see the dream. And so I'm just not going to think through the details. I want to go get it. That's a normal way that people see the world. And it leads to bad stuff sometimes, right? It can lead to fraud. It could lead to telling your investors you have something when you don't. It could lead to spinning so much that you start to buy into the spin. And here you have a case of you know, a real startup. She was, touted. I remember when it became big. I remember following it. And this is the youngest female billionaire ever. The next Steve Jobs. She even looked like Steve Jobs. Right? High turtleneck, the whole Silicon Valley thing. And as soon as you get into that space of like seeing the dream, you lose the patience. Now, if it's you and you drop out. I mean, like, if you're on the cover of Forbes, like, what are you gonna do? You have to, like, you gotta move, you gotta spend, you gotta say whatever. Like I'm saying, like, if you're doing a deal with Walgreens and you don't have it, like, you gotta fake it. But like if you're just doing it alone, you just drop it. But it's the same mentality, right? The mentality is, I see something, so I want something today, now. I can get it now. Right? Like, how many times have you bought something on Amazon, and then when they told you, like, shipping in, like, 12 days, you're like, 12 days? Like, I ordered a pencil, and it's going to take 12... Imagine that. Like, just like 5 minutes ago, we were like, yeah, that's how long it takes. Now, 12 days? Yeah, how long does it take to get something from Bangladesh? Like, I don't know. Like, that can't come overnight? I mean, how far is China? It says it's being made in India right now. Like, how far could that possibly? They can't figure out a way to get it to me by tomorrow morning. I ordered it. We're getting into this space. And this is the same story. I'm just telling you. Like, this is the same story. I got to be a billionaire at 30. Billionaire at 30? What the heck is that? Like, how do you become a billionaire at 30? You make stuff up. That's how you become a billionaire at 30. You promise things you can't deliver on. Billionaire at 30? Why don't you build a product that works? Why don't you, like, work in a lab for a decade and build something that's going to, like, change? No, we're going to say it, put it on a PowerPoint presentation. Right? It's a mentality that we all have. If you don't think you have it, either you don't, God bless you, or you're just denying it. We all have it. I want it now. I want it now. I want it now. Success. The product is happening with relationships. Relationships. It's scary. God should bless everybody. Young relationships. Where young people think, like, what? We're married for 2 years. Like, shouldn't it all work? Yeah. I don't understand. I'm putting in the time. This immediacy, this lack of patience, really, and I'm not saying I've nailed this in any which way. Remember, we're together. We're just calling it out together. This lack of patience is really one of our greatest blocks for not being more successful. You see, when you get into the awareness of what you want to want, you start to identify the things you want to go for. You start to build the rituals to get there. You're going to hit a major wall. A major wall. That's what we're going to talk about this week, with God's help. A major wall. Rituals we just, I think, touched on last week. I don't remember even. Yeah. But you're going to hit a major wall. You know what that major wall's called? Patience. Patience, because neuroplasticity requires patience. If you repeat it, it'll go. And in the book, I found this great study called the Tetris Study, in which they watched kids playing Tetris, and they started to measure their ability to, like, spatial recognition, and it happened fairly quickly. It was just a few weeks. You start to do things again and again and again. Okay, your brain orients around it very quickly, but orienting around something and changing something are two totally different things. There's a certain arc that builds and change. And if you want this year to really change something, like if you really want to change something, with God's help, you got to understand the arc, in my opinion, and how it works, and how to navigate through that. But before we get there, we gotta like open this up and call out the fact that we are being conditioned to be impatient. Like, period. We are living in a world where the inputs that we get to our brain is creating an expectation of things to happen immediately. Immediately. You order something to eat, you expect it in front of your house immediately. You order anything, you expect it in front of you immediately. Even the entrepreneurial culture, of which I spend time teaching and like to be a part, I'm all for it. I love it. I love the idea of rapid innovation. I love thinking out of the box. I love this stuff, but we gotta call out the idea that you think when you see people say things like we're going to become by, and it's like 2 years after college, or we're going to change. This happens like even in the nonprofit world, by the way. You hear things like we're going to change the world. So sometimes it's like nice and cute and like no one really means it, but every once in a while somebody does. Like, really, the world by next year? Like, for real? You know how big of a you know how many people you want to reach? Like, what's your timeline? You just listen for these things. Just listen for the outrageousness of how quickly we expect the world to be either accomplished or catering to us. And recognize it, whether or not you're in that startup or in that store, who cares? You hear it. And as soon as you hear it, it has an imprint on you. As soon as that happens, you think that way. And then when it comes to your own growth, you expect it. And it's that patience and impatience that is going to be your block. All right, we'll talk about it. All right, everybody. Have an amazing day. And with God's help, I cannot wait to see you again tomorrow. Have a great day.
Living on a lifeline, the world doesn't ever seem to change. Looking for the sunshine, but you're caught up in the rain. It's like your eyes are wide open, but you cannot see. You're watching life pass you by like 1, 2, 3. Walking in destruction, the winds of life blur your vision. All the devastation forever feels like you're on the run. It's time. No one else can set you free. You're locked inside, and only you have got the key.